This first video lecture is going to talk about Moliere, the playwright, and how his biography informs the play Tartuffe that we're studying in class. Comedy is Moliere's milieu in terms of the genre that he is most famous for, and Tartuffe is a play that's still performed throughout the world today. So let's get started with important information about his biography. 1622, little Jean-Baptiste is born to his father, also named Jean, into the upper-class French aristocratic society. This is important because as a member of the aristocracy, Moliere has access to the court. He rubs noses with famous and influential people. His father, Jean, has obtained a license that allows him to produce all of the bed sheets, the tapestries, the hosiery, all of those types of products for all of the court's many castles and palaces and locations. He pays a really good salary. He has the monopoly on it, and it also then gives him access to the people who are in power. Father Jean is quite pleased with the living that he is able to provide for his son, and he expects Jean-Baptiste to go into the tapestry business and the hosiery business and follow him in holding that license in the family. And Moliere wants absolutely none of this, which becomes important as we continue. Moliere is not a serious kid. He is what we would call the class clown. He likes to make people laugh. He doesn't take things very seriously. He is sent to be educated at the best schools in Paris, but his idea of being educated at the best schools and their idea of being educated at the best schools, not quite the same thing. So he sees rich people, he sees powerful people, he sees all of what is supposedly the best in the world, and he snubs it. He thinks that the aristocracy is pretentious and empty, airheaded, full of itself, and he makes fun of them. Now imagine how hard Dad has worked to get the license he has, and how upset he is at his son's attitude toward the people who are putting food on their table. He also got into some trouble early on because he made fun of his mother's priest. Now remember that France is all Catholic in all things, and a priest is the power center of local congregations and churches, and so making fun of the guy who holds the power is never a really smart move to make, and it did get Moliere into some trouble early on. Moliere is left as an orphan. His mom and then his stepmom die before he is 15. I guess orphan would imply his father's deceased as well. But they become estranged as Moliere starts making decisions that his dad does not approve of his making. This next slide has a picture that was taken at the Pont Neuf in 2005 when I was in Paris the first time. I'm showing you the picture because the river Seine in this picture divides Paris into two parts, the left and the right banks. And along the sides of the river, there are vendors who sell their wares. And today, when you go there, you can't really see it in this picture, but there are green cubicle-like wooden storefronts that are maybe 3 to 4 feet by 3 to 4 feet each, and they have locking panels on the front. But in the morning, the vendors come and they open up those doors, and then they sell comic books and cigars and whatever they're specializing in from these little cubicles. This has been going, this is a tradition in Paris for a long, long time, and it was true in Moliere's day as well. So while his dad was working on hosiery and bed curtains and all of those kinds of things, Moliere was out walking along the banks of the Seine River, and he was paying attention to the vendors who were there selling their wares. And so these salesmen would have to get the attention of their customers. So they developed skits and songs and dance routines and a vaudeville show, and all of it designed to take the attention away from the vendor next door to them and call attention to their own products. Moliere got really, really intrigued with watching these people perform and decided that a live performing was something that was of real interest to him. And in this slide, he also then reinforced this interest in performing with matinee shows that were performed in this theater that his grandfather took him to see. All right, so Moliere's getting the acting bug from two places. The street performers along the River Seine and the actual theater. In Paris, there were only 3 licenses to have a theater. And theaters were small and intimate and open only to the upper class. If the church allowed your theater to become a troupe of the king, then your company could perform at their will in a small venue similar to the one that is pictured here. And you can see along the side the boxes where the patrons sat. You would buy a box for the season, and depending on the money that you paid, your box might hold 4 people or 6 people, 8, 10, or 12. Some of them even had 20, depending on the theater. But the audience paid for the privilege to see the company perform, and in a really small venue with people like themselves, rich people. So if Moliere had not been born into a rich family or a privileged family, seeing theater performed would not have been something that he probably would have had much exposure to. He decides, as it comes closer and closer to time for him to become a sheet maker, that he is going to give his life to the theater, the illustrious theater. His troupe includes Madeleine Behar. She is an influential force in all of Moliere's adult life. She had a certain reputation. Her character questions were not exactly approved by the Catholic Church. She stayed with Moliere throughout a number of his troubles and was a creative influence for him, and they did have a relationship. When he took up with this woman, as his father would have referred to her sneeringly as that woman, when he took up with her and decided to form a theatrical troupe, he changed his name to Moliere so that his father wouldn't have to live with the embarrassment of having an actor for a son. But he didn't have a license, so performing in Paris is not something he's going to be able to do, so he takes this troupe on the road. And in the outlying villages and provinces, theatrical companies could travel and move around. They didn't have to have a license. They just couldn't stay put for an extended period of time. Moliere was trying to buy material. He borrowed money that he couldn't pay back. And this traveling troupe was a financial disaster that ends up putting him in debtor's prison for a while. And he gets out of debtor's prison still determined to become an actor. He is not going to give up on his dream. He is not going to be a sheet maker. And so he regroups, he begins to write his own material, and he reforms the troupe and takes them back out into the provinces, and does this for 12 whole years of small audiences, same troupe, developing material, feeding off each other, honing the skills of the troupe as well as the material they're performing. And he begins to develop a reputation that makes its way to King Louis XIV. Next slide. Here's a picture of the lovely Sun King Louis XIV. Isn't he attractive in those heels and hose? Don't you wish that you had a similar looking outfit? And what a fine wig that he's wearing. This is his official portrait, one of the official portraits. Louis XIV, as the Sun King, was a lover of a good time, and he loved the theater and he loved the arts. So he made a deal, a devil's bargain, as it were, with the Catholic Church, that he would have theater. They would grant the rights to these 3 theatrical troupes, licenses essentially, but he would stand behind them in matters of faith and paying what the church wanted their patrons to pay, those kinds of details. And while it was a devil's bargain, Louis XIV was okay with that. He was getting what he wanted out of being king. His palace in the city of Paris is now the Louvre. And you can see the picture also taken from 2005 of the Louvre as it is now. World-class art museum. The Mona Lisa is there, the Code of Hammurabi is there. Major artworks are housed in the Louvre. But during Moliere's time, it was Louis XIV's city palace. And so when he came to Paris and he had heard about Moliere's work, he invited Moliere to perform for a play for the king. They gather all of the court together and settle in for what Louis thinks is going to be a fun performance, and it's not. The troupe made a calculated error in performing a tragedy, and Louis was not pleased. So Moliere's a quick study, and he recognizes through nonverbals that Louis XIV did not appreciate the show that they put on. And he had the cojones to approach Louis and say, "We have a one-act. It's a comedy. I think you'll like it. If you'll give us a few more minutes, we'll perform it for you." Louis said to go ahead. He loved it, and the rest is history, as they say. Moliere soon had a license to perform at a theater in Paris. Part of the benefits of getting this license was he had the protection of the king. So he wasn't flitting around from village to village anymore. He had entree again into the best of society, support for the work that he was doing, a regular income, he was paid regardless, and some people respected and recognized his artistic integrity and abilities. But the Catholic Church never liked theater. They especially didn't like the kinds of satire and comedies that Moliere was doing. And he made a lot of enemies really fast. Remember, he had no problem mimicking them, making fun of them, pointing out where they were being idiots, any of that stuff. And that doesn't necessarily win us friends when we do that. When he wrote Tartuffe, or The Hypocrite, as it was first titled, people in the church got very, very upset. This is a satire not on Christianity or spiritual matters, but on corruption and hypocrisy. And the church was very, very corrupt at this particular point. Everybody had a paid license to do something, and they were in the church for the money and the benefits they were getting from it. So when they saw themselves pictured on stage in this satire, they were really upset. They found it very threatening. And so they went to Louis and said, you gotta shutter this. You've got to close the house. We can't have any more Tartuffe. And Louis at first didn't take him seriously. He was like, oh, come on, you guys, it's not that big a deal. And Louis should probably have paid attention sooner than he did, because they just kept on and kept on. And finally he realized that if he was going to keep his benefits as king and coexist with the Catholic Church, that he would have to ban Tartuffe. So he shuttered the house. And Tartuffe went 3 years before it was revised, approved, and performed again. So here you see in this slide the time breakdown on Tartuffe being performed on stage. 1664, you have the first 3 acts. In the original version, Tartuffe wasn't just a man of God wearing a crucifix as he is in our production. He was an actual cleric, a priest. And so the connection between him and his representation of the church really couldn't be avoided. So in 1667, he revised the play. We now have the 5 acts, and it was performed with Tartuffe as just a man of God and not a cleric. It was first performed at Versailles, and I have a book that I will pass around in class that has pictures of that castle. It's an amazing, amazing place. And it's important throughout French history and all of this period. It is where Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette spent most of their time leading up to the French Revolution and the loss of their heads. Okay, and finally, I wanted to show you where Moliere is buried. He had an illness, probably tuberculosis. When you live that many years in debtor's prison and you're traveling around the provinces and there are no antibiotics, the chances that you're going to get some contagious disease are good. And Moliere probably had tuberculosis. When he wrote his last play, The Imaginary Invalid, about a hypochondriac, he actually collapsed on stage and ended up dying. And he was carried back to his place and then ended up dying. And this is where the Catholic Church had its gotcha moment. He was denied last rites, he was refused a Christian burial, and he was taken out and buried without any pomp or circumstance. A number of years passed before the body was exhumed and moved to Père Lachaise Cemetery in Paris. And I'm showing you this picture for a couple reasons. One is, it's a really cool cemetery and an important burial site. Père Lachaise is something like 40-some acres, maybe more than that even, of monuments and gravestones. And a lot of them look like the one you see in the picture. And the other reason why I'm showing you the picture is to tell you that Crowder takes a international trip with students every year over spring break to Paris, and you should apply. It's a wonderful trip, and you'll never go for a cheaper price than you will on this student-led tour. And this was an English major student I had in 2009, and I got to go with the Crowder group, and I made her pose in front of the Moliere's monument. I wish she'd appreciate it someday.